that you see the screen when it pops up, that would be great. Karen or someone.
Yep, I can see it.
All right. Thank you
Would be
so much
good.
for the introduction. Thank you. So it's a little different for me to be in this setting, not being able to see you, but we're going to do the best we can. I also love engagement. I'm an educator at heart. So if I find myself talking too much, I get a bit uncomfortable. So feel free to interrupt, ask questions, comment. I want this to be as interactive and engaging as possible. I want to thank Sean and the others for having me. I work with Sean's wife. I've known of Sean for a while, but certainly great to be here talking about just my writing process, and just hopefully we can share some things together as artists in this space that will be helpful to all of us. So this is me. If you go to the website again, charlesbarrett.org, you'll learn more about me. What wasn't shared is that I'm also a musician, been playing for, I guess, almost over 30 years, primarily in church, gospel musician, pianist, organist. But my professional job, I'm a psychologist and also graduate professor at a couple schools, and of course an author, which is why I'm here today to share that part of my life. These are the 4 books that we're going to talk about a little bit as we go on today. They're all quite different, but the latest one, Today in School Psychology, was just released about 3 weeks ago. These are all also available on Amazon or the website. But yeah, we'll talk about my writing process and what I try to communicate in my writing, regardless of the audience that I'm speaking to. It's just a website. I'll also make these available, these slides, and I think this is hyperlinked to my website. You can check that out. I do a lot of social media, typically about school psychology, but also other topics that I'm passionate about. So feel free to follow Twitter and Instagram. Facebook is just Charles Barrett. You'll see a picture of my wife and I. But this is me, so I'd love to see you on social media. Whenever I speak, I do a fair amount of speaking to educators, other school psychologists, and school districts, or even corporations about different topics. I always have kind of a 4-part structure to my talks, and I want to also keep that consistent today. So the first one is connection, then some content. I always want to leave you with a challenge, and then we'll have some closing activity or closing thoughts before we end our time together. So connection, content, challenge, and then closing is how we'll spend our time today. So here's our connection. If you follow, I use these hashtags, and we'll also get to this as part of a pretty intentional process as it relates to writing. I use these hashtags primarily, and they're also titles of 2 of the books that I mentioned earlier. So it's always about the children, and Today in School Psychology are just 2 things that we'll get to later on. But here's a fundamental thing that I believe in my practice as a school psychologist, and I think a lot of life in general is really based on authentic relationship with people. This image here, or this picture, is James Comer, noted child psychiatrist at Yale, and he says no significant learning happens without significant relationship. So I want to kind of shift a little bit from how I typically talk about relationship with educators, but for writers, even if we are content experts or we're master writers, although we're all growing and developing our skills, our effectiveness really is hinging on our ability to connect to our audience in meaningful ways. So who am I writing to, and how can I connect to them effectively as a writer, as a communicator, to really convey my message effectively? So who's my audience? What do they need? And how can I use my writing to effectively meet a need in my audience's life? So who's buying my product? Who's reading my product online? Am I effectively meeting a need that I've identified in that audience? We'll get to that as well as we talk some more. these are a couple things that kids tell me. The latest book, Today in School Psychology, is really a collection over 75 kind of cute sayings, funny sayings from kids primarily, some lessons or musings I've learned in school psychology and education. But here's one. You are big and brown and have brown skin. This kind of came out of nowhere. A student I was testing could have been 6 or 7 years old. And then I saw this one. First grader asked me, is he your father? You know, most of the kids that I work with do not look like me. So whenever I go into a classroom and pick up a student to work with and the kid is black or looks like me, I get this question from kids in kindergarten, first, second grade. But it taught me a really profound lesson. It taught me that children admit to seeing color or identifying differences. Why don't we do this as naturally as adults? This notion of color blindness, not all that helpful in our discourse. So a lot of my work in writing, especially in school psychology and education, has been around social justice and issues of diversity, equity, inclusion. So just these are kind of the things that you'll see in Today in School Psychology, and also how I end these posts online. This is why a day without direct contact with students is wasted, or with a student is wasted. I love my time with kids. I've been starving for that since March, being home away from my students. So hope to inspire you today with a couple of things that help me in my practice, but really as a writer that you can certainly take for your own work. So today, I am not here to do anything but encourage you. I think we are critical of people enough. That's never my intent to challenge your practice or challenge you in a way that leads to you being discouraged. But hopefully what I share can be helpful, can be encouraging in your content development, in your writing process, in your writing productivity. That's really what I want to do. One primary purpose is to encourage people as we go along today. So here are some learning targets. I'm trying to be a little less formal as I would as an educator, but I wanted to cover 4 things from the topic or the title of the session. I want to talk about purpose, I want to talk about passion, and then I want to talk about hope and wholeness, which are really personal to me. But everyone has purpose and passion somewhere, and I want to really encourage you to maybe identify that, maybe refine it if you know about it, and then use that in your writing process. So let's get started with some content. Oops. So if you go on my website, when you go to the About page, these are the first few words you'll read about me. I'm an artist who I think deeply about the world through these lenses of psychology, faith, and education. And that's really what I write about. There's a blog on my page as well that gives some of my faith perspectives. But this part is really kind of more important for today. Whatever I'm doing, psychology, teaching, writing, music, my purpose is always the same. And that's to communicate and facilitate hope and wholeness for people. So if I'm working with a family and kind of walking through the process of identifying a disability in their child or in their children, that's a hard thing for families. So my role is to really give them hope that despite this outcome, your child can still succeed, your child can still achieve. Working with students, I want to encourage them that they're learning, they're growing, and they can be great school psychologists. I just finished my class for the summer on Wednesday, and I was really encouraged myself that students felt that from me, that they felt that I believed in them and really was in their corner as they developed their skills as school psychologists. So we're gonna get to purpose, hope, and wholeness as we talk some more today. 13-year-old kid, this also, again, back to Today in School Psychology. This was not the right answer to the question I asked him, but I thought it was a good answer. Purpose is something that you're meant for. And I want to start here in our talk because I don't think this is really highlighted in the writing process or in our writing instruction or writing pedagogy, be it undergrad or graduate school. But I do want to start with, I think a lot of us, I was also an English major undergrad, always loved to write. The next slide, I think, talks about how my original plan was to be a high school English teacher. And that changed for a variety of reasons, but still love to write, still finished my degree in English as an undergrad. But as a writer, I think we're always taught about the audience, and that's really important. Who we're talking to, who we're writing for, that's certainly significant. But I don't think we talk enough about who we are first as individuals and what we bring to whatever we produce as a writing product. So regardless of what you're writing, essay, book, article, whatever that is, and who you're writing for, could be the general public or kids, families, professionals in a certain discipline. What is it about you as a writer that you want your readers to know? I do think a piece of us, because we are passionate about what we're doing, I do think a piece of us is captured in whatever product that we are producing. So what is it about Charles Barrett or whatever, uh, whoever you may be, what is it that you want your readers to know about you as an individual, more than the content, more than the topic, as you are producing, various products? But the second question I want you to also consider is, what do you want them to feel having read, either while they're reading or after they have read your piece? What do you want them to feel or take away from that literary masterpiece? I know we're all proud of what we produce. So you've written something. As they're reading, what do I want them to take away from this in the moment, but even after the fact? How do I want them to reflect and feel about that? I told you that I'm a teacher at heart, so I do want to build in some time to maybe have some dialogue about that. If you can think for a moment and just feel free to either put it in the chat or we can just share out loud. I wish I could see you, but I don't think that's possible. But let's just have a little short discussion about what you're writing, what you're thinking about writing, and maybe those last two questions. Don't be shy. You're in a safe space. I see one person. So Ruth says, I want to write about racism in a productive way in my fiction, but as a white woman, I hesitate. Oh, great, great question. I'm going to talk about that a little bit as we go on. I definitely want to answer that live. So I'm going to give others a few moments to maybe put something else in the chat. Any other comments? Okay. Well, Ruth, I'm going to get to your topic, your question in a moment, because it happens that we just write for ourselves. Okay. Is that Nagua? I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Dawood. In writing historical fiction, I want readers to learn facts, but especially to understand the times, hoping my stories will uplift even in sad times. Great. Thanks, Pat. Thanks for your contributions. I I see another one in the queue. I primarily write poetry, and I usually hope for the reader to connect with a feeling or emotion. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, all of you, for contributing. I'm definitely going to get to what Ruth offered in a moment. So that's certainly very important. That's also a part of my writing and my work. And I'll just kind of give you some perspective on that. It could be helpful. But thank you, Pat and Nagwa, as well, for sharing those thoughts. So for me, regardless of the topic, I see one more. I'm sorry. Amy writes, I write memoir and fiction and worry about coming off too much about me, which seems okay. Great. Thank you for that. I will certainly get to that as well. If I don't, remind me somehow. Thank you so much. For me, my two main goals or purpose would be hope and wholeness. I want people to have hope regardless of how difficult the topic may be. I wrote a piece recently about Black Lives Matter, and I try to write in a way that's always instructive without being condescending. And I'll kind of give you some ideas about how I do that. But I want people to walk away with, although this is where we are at this time, whatever the topic may be, there's still hope of becoming better in the future. So that's kind of this difficult moment that we're in for whatever the topic is. Again, it could be disability, with parents and talking to them, or, societal issues around race and racism. I do want to frame it that we can be better. We can do better, of course, if we make certain decisions and improve our practice. And then the other part is that I just want people to be whole. I definitely want people to have the ability to be complete, not perfect, because no one's perfect, but to really be complete in their functioning. So again, that goes back to my psychology background. I want them to be happy, to be healthy, to be whole in where they're feeling. I do that by trying to encourage people, even in some of my writing, which I'll show you in a moment as we go along. I'm seeing the Q&A is pretty active. Perfect. Thank you for that. So, fundamental question, how do I know what to write about? There's a lot going on, a lot in my mind, a lot that I'm thinking about, but how do I focus and know what to write about? I'm going to give you maybe some simple answers, but things that work for me. I think we have to find our passion, find what drives you, find what excites you. Simple way that I think about it, find what you would do if you weren't paid for it. Find what you would do that just brings you internal satisfaction or intrinsic satisfaction beyond the money, beyond fame and notoriety. Although we need those things in different ways as people, but find what really drives you, motivates you, what keeps you up at night, what do you think about if you could all day. And that often is our passion and what we should be trying to communicate to people in some way. So I write about things that interest me. Again, psychology, faith, education. Although I'm a school psychologist, I think my angle of hope and wholeness comes across as I'm really more educator than I am psychologist. So as I'm writing, I'm trying to teach, I'm trying to explain, I'm trying to make hard concepts a bit more understandable. Trying to make complicated things a bit more palatable for people. As I do that, it's not always easy because I think sometimes hard things just have to be said directly. Ruth mentioned writing about race and racism and coming across, especially as a white woman, being careful about that. But I think that when we write and we use human experience, when we use stories to really convey these hard truths, I think that's one way to come across a bit more helpful rather than overly critical or what's the word? Looking for not as helpful, I guess I'll say. But I think writing in general, the beauty of the written word is that we can always revisit it to really further reflect, further think about, um, what we've heard and further reflectively promote, further learning. So I think as we talk and discuss, I think that's good, but I think the written word helps people to reflect and think more long after these conversations have been held. So I like kind of keeping a record of things and allowing people their individual quiet time to reflect and grow in their own way. So I'm going to use this image as an example of something that I write about a lot. Oops. And I'm sure we've seen this or some variation of this image over time. And if we had more time to unpack this, I would talk about, the main kind of goal of the image. It's not perfect because no image can really capture this perfectly. But I think that the overall goal is that the image on the left is talking about equality, whereas the right image is talking about equity. And these are, weighty topics, but I think hopefully, Ruth, this may help a little bit in what you referred to. But I use this as a jumping off place to encourage teachers and parents when they say this: I treat all of my kids the same. And we know, from the picture that all kids are not the same. So they need different things. As a writer, all of our audiences are not the same, and they need different support or different ways of presenting information. So here's something that I've been thinking about for a while. Here's another image that highlights that. But here's something that I wrote about online and posted a lot about: these three areas: diversity, inclusion, and equity. Not synonymous, certainly very, very different ways of looking at the world in which we live. But I think this little piece here, short social media post, gotten some great feedback on it, that it's really helpful. Just how we, I think good writers in many ways could be good teachers, in the sense that they explain things in ways that are clear and understandable. So just a little quick example of how I use the power of the written word to unpack these loaded concepts, these loaded categories or constructs, to really make it helpful for people to grow and do better in whatever walk of life they may be experiencing. So let's get a little bit into my writing process, and the social media is going to be important for that as well. So I think that writers are fundamentally curious about the world. They have questions, they have insight, because they pay attention to what's going on around them. I have that image of Oprah there because Oprah, to me, is a person that tends to have a pulse on the people. She just knows what the culture is looking for, what the culture needs. And I think that's a large part of her success, and others, people that really kind of have a sense of what's going on in our society, and how can I, again, fill that need, fill that gap. That show that we've all maybe heard about, where she gave everyone a car. It wasn't about the car that everyone received. It was that the audience was handpicked. Everyone needed a car, and that's why they were so excited, and the emotion was conveyed in that way. So as a writer, knowing our audience, or knowing the world that we're living in and what's meaningful to them, are great ways to develop content that's relevant. But as I'm paying attention to society, to my community, to my family, what's resonating with them, those may be things that I could be writing about to really fill a void in people's lives. I'm a big, as I said before, I use social media a lot, but I don't think people know how intentional social media can be for developing content, storing content, and really assisting in the writing process. So, first of all, it's free. Social media doesn't cost anyone anything in most cases. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, um, sign up, you have an account. But what I do with social media is that it's allowing me to test content. When I make a post, how I phrase things, images I use, what do people respond to? What do they like? What are they really resonating with as I'm sharing these things? A lot of it's just my day in the life of a school psychologist. But as I'm using those hashtags, I'm also storing and organizing content. Both of these books, the first one was released back in 2018, and I wrote it literally in about 6 weeks over the summer. And it was a collection of maybe a year or two of social media content that I was able to organize into 6 chapters. Just things that I had been observing in schools and school psychology around kids. But all of that posting led me to organize it. And I had the content, and in literally a summer, I was able to write it, publish it, and be done. Same thing with the other book, Today in School Psychology. It's really a collection of Facebook posts and Twitter posts and Instagram posts um, that I've made over the past maybe year and a half or so that led me to really have all this information. And when I do that, I find that the books almost write themselves. I've never sat down to write a book from cover to cover. That's just not really my style. But when I have information and content in various places, typically social media, it's easy just to kind of go in, find it, organize it, and that helps me a lot in my process. But I also encourage people, especially for us, those of us who may be independent artists or independent writers, not having the backing of major publishing houses yet. Posting consistently helps you to develop a following. I know people have told me that they look forward to these Today in School Psychology posts. They look for it because I typically do it, every evening or every day at some point. And that helps to really develop a following that, in a very practical sense, translates into buyers for your product eventually. Some may wonder that, well, aren't you giving away so much of your, content for free? And I think that's true, but I found that the more that I give, the more that I also have. Again, writing from a place of purpose and a place of passion, for me, that's an endless supply. I'll never run out of content about school psychology and kids and hope and wholeness. So I share it freely, because the more I share, the more I believe comes back to me, in content and in other ways. So just a couple ideas about how you can start to organize content, how you can start to develop a following by using social media in very intentional ways. This is my other book. This is a very different product. This is like a daily journal, 366 daily affirmations. Back in 2018, I started sending a daily text message to people. Just a short, inspirational, nothing overly theological or overly spiritual, but just a short, little encouraging message. Right now, we're up to about 480 people, and they just subscribe by doing that. And what I did is I just compiled 1 year's worth of messages, packaged it into a book, and it's like a little journal. People can write their reflection on each page, but just, again, a simple way to organize information, based on what I've collected over time. So now I'm in my 30 of doing this, and I'll be releasing something else probably in the fall, around like a Thanksgiving kind of harvest theme, that I think would be helpful for where we are now with COVID-19, people, feeling different ways. Just a little something to, again, inspire and encourage people. But that's a different product. But again, I stored that by just sending those out every day, and then collected a whole year's worth and made it into a book that people find to be beneficial. Someone put in the chat or let me know what you think that image represents. A billion drafts and bad ideas, frustration. Great. Thank you, Amy. Someone else. Rough drafts, frustration. Thanks, Elizabeth. At least one more person. A lot of false starts. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are all great answers, and we've all been there, in writing, trying to find that perfect thing. But I want to see one more. Pat, a day in my life. I get it. Certainly. I want to share this with you. Writing, I believe, sometimes is more thinking than it is writing. And I share this because I want to challenge the notion of writer's block. And I know we've all been there or feel like we've had writer's block, but I think when I have a hard time writing, it's not that I have nothing to write about, it's that I don't really feel like thinking and really organizing my thoughts or focusing the concentrated mental effort at times to really produce writing. Even these short messages, texts that I send every morning, it takes time to think about that stuff. So when I don't feel like writing, it's more often that I don't feel like thinking, which is also taxing. So again, when you're out there with these billion drafts and nothing seems to be connecting, I want to reframe that. Maybe it's not writer's block. Maybe we just kind of clear our minds and think differently about what we're writing. Who are we centering? Is it me as the author? Is it my audience? Whose perspective maybe should I be thinking about differently as I approach whatever product that I'm trying to produce? But the writing is thinking part. I have a couple pieces that I need to be doing for next week, and I just don't feel like thinking about it. I know what I want to say generally, but I've just been holding off because I'm exhausted from having to think about other things. So again, I don't know that we have writer's block in the sense that we have nothing to say, but I think that we're just tired of thinking, because that is a pretty exhausting process. So here is my challenge for you as we continue. I want you to think about what inspires you to write and why do you write. I know some people put in the Q&A and in the chat some great things, hoping my stories will uplift even in sad times. That was the person who writes about historical fiction. Someone wrote about poetry and want them to experience some type of feeling or emotion. I want you to think about these things as you go on in your writing process, but also what compels you to write, what draws you in, that makes you want to sit and write a piece of poetry or nonfiction or fiction. Tapping into those ideas, I think, is the key to sustaining our writing over time. So more than what we're writing or the particular piece, there's that fundamental why this is important to me, or why it's important that I invest the energy to produce something that I think is worthy of other people reading. Other thing I want to say, we can certainly chat about this as well. There's another think pair share, so feel free to put it in the chat. I want to give you a few moments to do that, and then we'll continue. So here are the questions again. What compels you to write? What drives you? What inspires you? And I'll share some of mine as we move forward. A desire to be a positive source. Yes, to be an encourager. You are right. This is why. Thank you, Elizabeth. Great. I appreciate that. Make something clear. Thank you, Nagua. Great. At least one more person to clear misunderstanding. I am somehow compelled to write. I can't not write. Yeah, exactly. I think that's another way of looking at it, Connie. It's what can you not do, um, or what can you not live without feeling whole? For me, it's not necessarily writing, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything if I'm not encouraging people. So again, through my teaching, through my writing, through music, if I'm not encouraging people, my life feels incomplete. And the writing is just one avenue, one vehicle that I use to encourage people. Now, to make yourself or others happy. Yeah, writing is extremely therapeutic. It's extremely cathartic. So just sometimes the process of getting things out on paper, certainly very helpful for me personally. So certainly I identify with that. Excellent, excellent. Thank you for your comments and questions, your engagement. I appreciate it. So let me go on. So, that might have been just a long way of saying, what motivates you or what inspires you to write. I'm going to share some of my motivation and inspiration. I write to answer my own questions and lack of understanding. I write for personal satisfaction and prove I can do it. Excellent. Yes, certainly. There's nothing like completing something and you being proud of it, regardless of what others may think of it or read of it. I definitely don't write for money. Some of my books have taken off and have done, relatively well for an independent or just kind of a first time author, I guess. But I really do it because it's for me personally satisfying and meaningful. I believe in my message. So if one person buys a book or reads the book, that's enough for me. But even just me getting it out there and completing that project, it's certainly beneficial for me. So here are a couple of things that inspire me. Certainly children are one of my biggest inspiration, hence the book. I think when we keep kids at the center as educators, then I think a lot of the other stuff goes away. What's good for kids, to start there, and then we move forward. But secondly, water is a major source of inspiration for me. The sound of running water or just being by a body of water. um, my wife and I talk about a goal being a lakefront house at some point. If I could see water every day or live on water, it would be perfect. I would write probably nonstop. It just speaks to me. A lot of my ideas come in the shower. It's just something about that environment that really opens up my understanding and thought process really clearly. The other thing is early in the morning. I'm an early riser just naturally, and I think I do my best thinking somewhere between 6 and 7:30. It's just something about the stillness of that time, the darkness, the quiet, the peace of it. So if I had early morning and water, that's probably the best combination for me to really get my best writing done. Um, and projects completed. And then again, I write to teach, write to make things clearer, as others have said, in the chat. And also again, to encourage people. I want people to really leave whatever I've written feeling that they can do better, they can be better, and that there's hope on the other side of whatever they're experiencing. So here's a slight closing. Again, these are the books. They're all very different. I didn't talk about To Encourage You too much. That was my first book back in, I guess 2016. I wrote that. And that's about 34, maybe 43, 34 or 43 essays, I think in 10 sections. When I was playing for a church some years ago, I used to write these short pieces and share them with others in the music ministry, choir members, musicians, dancers sometimes, based on whatever theme. Could be like an Advent, or could be freedom, or whatever we were singing about or focused on. And again, I just compiled those over the years. So I had all this information, all this product that I want to just kind of compile into a short little kind of chicken soup for the soul. That's how I would describe it. But what I like about this book is that I give space for personal reflection. Actually, all the books, except for Today in School Psychology, I always want people to spend time reflecting after they've written or after they've read a certain piece. So there are a couple questions that people use for their own personal study, small group, settings or individual settings, just to reflect on, what they're feeling, what they're thinking about. Same thing for It's Always About the Children. I give questions at the end of each chapter, 5 or 6 questions, just to think about, how people can improve their practice as educators and psychologists. I told you about Promises for You and also Today in School Psychology. So those are all what I have so far, but book number 5 should be finished sometime late summer, early fall, and then out sometime in the fall. This is my publishing company. All of these books are self-published. If you have questions about that process, happy to walk you through it, talk to you about it. I recommend it. It's worked well for me. All of my books are done through Amazon KDP, or it used to be called Kindle Direct, but I think it's KDP now. That's been fine for me, again, the Amazon outlet, but also having the ability to sell, from the website and have books on hand. I like the print on demand opportunity. So you can print one book, you can print 1,000 books, depending on what the need is. So again, happy to talk through the self-publishing process with anyone. That works for me right now. I haven't figured out how to get into the major retailers yet. I know there's a way to do that and be self-published. That's kind of my next project. But again, I am on Amazon and the website. You can find all of these. So that's what I have for you. Any questions, any comments? And then here's the last slide. Again, my website, email address, and the products there. Dr. Barrett, the issue is always Charles, Ruth, and everybody. The issue of reopening our schools during increase of COVID-19 has become controversial. How should we be thinking about this as parents and community members? How do we balance the kids' emotional need to be in school with the serious health risk to our teachers? Excellent question. I'm going to answer this one live because I've been thinking about this a lot for obvious reasons. First, I would say that this is a complicated issue that I think we can all appreciate. And having, talked to superintendents and other district leaders, I do feel that many of them are trying to be as balanced and responsive to all the competing demands as possible. And I also want to acknowledge that there is no perfect answer or no easy answer. Whatever you do is going to be challenging or criticized by someone. I think, to answer the question, Ruth, I think that we have to pay attention to science and what science is saying. But even saying that, there's so many competing theories out there about, can kids carry it? Can they not? Are they at risk? And all those things. I think this romanticized idea about, kids being in school, I believe that. I think that schools are a great place for not only academics, but also social emotional connection and friendships and social skills and sharing, taking turns. But I think we are missing something to think that if we go back to school with all of the safety precautions, that's not how school is going to look. So it's not going to be kids playing like they were in March before schools closed, or sitting close together or holding hands and all the things that are healthy. So I think we have to really be honest with ourselves that what we think school is going to look like in the age of COVID is not what it looked like before. And certainly a lot of those things prior were what was beneficial about school. So I certainly am not in a position to give direct advice, but I do think we have to look at all of these things as far as what are we expecting school to look like, and is that a healthy environment for students? I think if you can provide meaningful outlets for kids socially to engage with their peers in different ways, distance learning may be appropriate for you. But I also know that depending on families' other demands, they may not be able to manage their children being home all day and supporting their learning. 'Cause it does also fall on the family to support that, even with teachers teaching online to a degree. So I think that there's just a lot of different things to consider. But I think that one of my biggest points to highlight is I think there's an assumption that when kids are back in school, that by virtue of being in school, it's going to feel like pre-COVID school, and that's just not accurate or realistic. Hope that helps somewhat, Ruth, in your in your question. I do want to get to perfect. Thanks, Ruth. Nagua, yes. So self-publishing is really easy. I'm going to give you a quick outline, and of course, there's happy to chat more if you email me. But the quick outline is that so you have your manuscript, you have your Word document or whatever you've read, whatever you've done with that product. What you need to do is find a typesetter, and a person that has experience in typesetting for books can give you ideas about how the book should be formatted. So for example, my To Encourage You book is 6x9. So is It's always about the children. These other in the middle are more like 5x8, 5x7. They can give you guidelines based on what other books that have that same general purpose or general market, how they're typically sized, and they will make your manuscript as a Word document, or typically a Word document. They'll make that into a book. They'll make it formatted and sized for a book. After that, if you go with someplace like Amazon KDP, you sign up for an account, you upload your manuscript to KDP, you choose whatever size it's formatted as, and they have some guidelines there for that as well. And essentially it goes into this online kind of computer process, and they check for errors, not spelling and grammar, but really errors as far as are the pages within the certain margins and all of that, the bleed and kind of the technical aspects of formatting a book. You approve it in that, please see. So first you go to a typesetter. So a person who can typeset your book, your Word document into 6x9 or 8x12 or 5x8, whatever that size is. You have to get someone, yes, typesetter, exactly. So after you go to KDP, they do have an option. They can design your front and back cover for you. I've never done that. I think it comes out good, but pretty generic. I've always went to my own graphic designer, and she has always designed my front and back cover for me. So she gives me that file. I upload the file also to KDP, front cover, back cover. And once that's all approved, again, the sizing is correct. It fits in their margins. Sometimes there's some minor tweaks. Things aren't exactly lined up based on their technical specifications. And there are a couple edits you go through with your typesetter or your graphic designer. After that's done, you approve it. You can always order a proof copy. I've always done that because even looking at it online, although it looks good, I want to see it, touch it, feel it, make sure that everything is really how it should be. this last book, I had a couple issues that I've never had before with Amazon, and I'm glad I had actually ordered my 2 proof copies before, because things were not right based on what I saw online. There was still some shifting in the formatting. So you want to order a proof copy. You can get that, in a couple days. Once you like what you have, you will approve it for publication, and it's typically live on Amazon within 24 to 72 hours. In my experience, it's typically more on the 24-hour side. You set the price. They give you guidelines, but you can certainly set the price for your book. I want to say the royalty from Amazon is pretty standard. It's like $5 a book. And I don't think that is dependent on what you sell the book for, but I could be wrong. My first book, To Encourage You, is $14.99, and these others are, maybe the first 2 are $14.99, in the school psychology and children's book, always about the children, those are $12. But I want to say I get the same royalty from Amazon regardless. What you can also do through this process, the KDP, once it's live, you can also order author copies. So as the author of the book, you can order copies for yourself to sell. If you go to an event, you go speak somewhere, from your website. And the author copies are always much less. So for example, Stories About the Children and Today in School Psychology, those author copies are $2.15 per book. So essentially, to print the book is $2.15. And then when I sell for $12 on my website or $12 on Amazon, the balance is mine as profit. So that's where I think the self-publishing is very helpful. You get a much larger percentage based on doing it yourself, rather than going with these bigger, larger publishing houses. The only benefit I see with going with, the Random House and all those folks, they're great, but they have a much larger reach. So you'll be in all the major sellers, Barnes and Noble and Books A Million, all those places. However, they will take a much larger percentage of your royalty. So it may be down to cents per copy that you get as the author. So essentially, the job of the publisher is to manage the entire process. So instead of Random House doing it, or Penguin, or whomever does it, you're the one farming out the, no problem, now always Charles, sir. You're farming out the typesetting, you're farming out the cover design. All that's your responsibility to manage, but it really isn't that hard. I have some folks I can recommend to you who are great. So royalty, Nagua, is how much money you make per copy. So for example, when I sell from my website a book that's $12 and I've spent $2.15 to print that one copy, I make almost $10 profit per book from my website. The other books that are on Amazon, because it is a larger reach, I think I get like $5 per book. But that's fine, because there's people on Amazon that I'll never meet, never read through my website. And then I get like a quarterly check or a monthly. I forgot the frequency, but even that you can set up to be to your liking. So there certainly is a financial benefit. And for me, where I am now in my stage of writing, the self-publishing works just fine, and it's been good. A lot more flexibility and ownership. The other thing is that every book has an ISBN number. Bowker, Bowker, is a great website. You can purchase your own ISBN. You want to do that because whoever has the ISBN owns the book. So for example, let's say you start out self-publishing, but someone wants to distribute it, Random House, or someone wants to, kind of bring you in for a much larger deal. Maybe there's some signing bonus or upfront royalty. whoever owns the ISBN owns the book. So you want to make sure that you own your own ISBN when you do this. One day, maybe I'll get to Random House and these other, major folks out there. But for now, I'm doing just fine with the independent process. I'm not sure I follow Nagua. Is this trusted process? KDP, yes. Many folks do it. I've had no issues with that. So definitely, there are others out there that I get emails from that are kind of independent or self-publishing. But again, they're managing that for you. So I still think you get more of the royalty, you get more ownership of the whole process when you just do it yourself. Don't fear stealing. Yeah, I don't think so. I've never had an issue with that at all, as far as people stealing my information. It's copyrighted. The ISBN is there. It's certainly protected as your product. But great question. Feel free to stay in touch, either through social media. That's on the first slide. But also email and my website. Would love to chat further. Hope it was helpful. The things that I shared to kind of help you think through, why you write and how you write. But certainly want to hear more from you through email or Facebook or social media.
Great.
Thanks,
Charles. This is Karen, your host again. Just wanted to thank you so much for joining us and for spending the time with the presentation, putting together all of this really helpful information. It's been a terrific hour to sit and listen to what you had to say. So I thank you again. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Everyone else, thank you for sticking around for another hour and being with us for this session. For those of you who will stay here in track 1, our next session starts at 5:30, and it is the Black Ladies Brunch Collective. It looks phenomenal. I am super, super excited to listen to some of these women. I think it's going to be absolutely terrific. There are also 2 other tracks also meeting at 5:30. The second one is How Women Write Horror, and the third one is Coming Out Asian American. So all 3 tracks, don't know how you're going to be able to choose between them, but that's what we aim to do here at 1455. So thank you again, and we will see you back in about a half an hour. Bye.